The faithful friend. A tale of loyalty. In a cozy little town nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, there lived a golden retriever named Max. Max wasn't just any ordinary dog. He was known throughout the neighborhood for his unwavering loyalty and gentle nature. His human, old Mr. Thompson, was a kind-hearted teacher who had rescued Max when he was just a tiny pup. Every morning, Max would wake up early, wag his tail, and patiently wait by the front door for Mr. Thompson to come downstairs. Together, they'd go for a walk in the nearby park, where Max would chase squirrels, never catching them, of course, and Mr. Thompson would greet his fellow early risers. One day, as autumn leaves began to paint the town in shades of red and gold, Mr. Thompson fell ill. He had to go to the hospital in the big city, leaving Max in the care of his next-door neighbor, Mrs. Baker. "Shen?" "Don't worry," old friend Mr. Thompson said, patting Max's head. "I'll be back before you know it. Be a good boy for Mrs. Baker." Max whimpered softly as he watched the ambulance drive away, not fully understanding what was happening but sensing that something was wrong. From that day on, Max developed a new routine. Every morning he'd wake up early and trot to Mr. Thompson's house. He'd sit on the porch, waiting patiently for hours, hoping to see his beloved human return. Mrs. Baker, a kind elderly lady with a fondness for knitting, would bring Max his meals and try to coax him back to her house. "Come on, Max," she'd say gently. "Mr. Thompson isn't here right now. Let's go home and have some dinner." But Max would only eat a little before returning to his vigilant post on Mr. Thompson's porch. Rain or shine, hot or cold, Max remained faithful to his watch. The other animals in the neighborhood noticed Max's dedication. Whiskers, the curious tabby cat from across the street, often visited Max on the porch. "Why do you sit here every day?" Whiskers asked one afternoon, licking his paw. "You could be chasing mice or napping in the sun like the rest of us." Max looked at Whiskers with his big, brown eyes. "Because this is where I belong," he replied simply. "Mr. Thompson will come back, and I want to be here when he does." Whiskers shook his head, not quite understanding, but admiring Max's determination nonetheless. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the seasons changed. The golden leaves of autumn gave way to winter's first snow, but Max's loyalty never wavered. He braved the cold, his thick fur collecting snowflakes as he maintained his vigil. Charlie, a chatty blue jay, would often perch on the porch railing near Max. "You know," Charlie chirped one frosty morning, "I've flown all over this town, and I've never seen anyone as loyal as you, Max. It's quite impressive." Max's tail wagged slightly at the compliment. "Thank you, Charlie. Mr. Thompson has always been there for me. Now it's my turn to be there for him." As winter melted into spring, the whole town had heard about Max's unwavering loyalty. Children would stop by after school to pet him and bring him treats. Adults would pause on their walks to offer words of encouragement. Max appreciated their kindness, but his eyes remained fixed on the road, waiting for the familiar sight of Mr. Thompson's car. One warm spring day, as flowers began to bloom and birds sang their cheerful songs, something extraordinary happened. A car pulled up in front of Mr. Thompson's house. Max's ears perked up and his heart began to race. Could it be? "Pooey!" The car door opened, and out stepped Mr. Thompson, looking a bit thinner, but with a big smile on his face. Max couldn't believe his eyes. He barked joyfully and raced down the porch steps, nearly knocking over his beloved human in his excitement. "Max, my faithful friend," Mr. Thompson laughed, kneeling down to embrace his loyal companion. "Mrs. Baker told me you've been waiting here every day. Oh, how I've missed you." Tears of joy streamed down Mr. Thompson's face as Max covered him with enthusiastic licks. The commotion drew neighbors out of their houses, and soon, a small crowd had gathered to witness the heartwarming reunion. Mrs. Baker approached, her eyes misty. "Welcome home, Mr. Thompson. Max has been the talk of the town, you know. He's shown us all what true loyalty means." Mr. Thompson nodded, still holding Max close. "I always knew he was special, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." From that day on, Max and Mr. Thompson's bond grew even stronger. Their morning walks resumed, but now they were joined by other dogs and their humans, all inspired by Max's unwavering faith and loyalty. As for Max, he was simply happy to have his best friend back. He didn't understand why everyone called him a hero or why children would point and whisper, "Look, it's the loyal dog," to him. He had just been doing what came naturally, being there for someone he loved. Years later, long after Max had grown old and crossed the Rainbow Bridge, parents in the little town would still tell their children the story of the golden retriever who waited faithfully for months, teaching everyone the true meaning of loyalty and love. And so, Max's legacy lived on, reminding all who heard his tale that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come not from grand gestures, but from the simple, steadfast loyalty of a true friend. The end.